Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to call the Dare County Board of Education Budget Work Session to order. Today is Tuesday, April 25th, 2023, and we're meeting at the Dare County Schools Administration Office in Nags Head. And the time is now 1:02. Before we begin the workshop, I'd like to request a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion we approve the agenda?
Is there a second?
A second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, a call for a vote. All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The agenda has been approved. Next, I'll turn the meeting over to Ms. Anna McGinnis for presenting of the proposed budget. Anna?
Thank you. The budget is a planning tool. It's not a perfect document. You'll probably find some mistakes. I always challenge people to find a mistake in the budget. I didn't intentionally put one in there, but it always happens.
You should.
Exactly.
Find the secret mistake.
Did you find it?
Not yet. I can keep looking. It's there.
I found it.
I also want to mention that budget transfers, something we do every year, especially this time of year when we're trying to clean up all the programs. All of them had not been done by March 31st. I will point out that Sweet Finance Department's been short-staffed by 2, so everybody is sort of working their fannies off. That's an appropriate word, right? Trying to get everything done for year-end close. So you may see some weird things like expenditures last year might have been $5,000. Budget this year was $6,000. Expenditures to date this year are $8,300. The money's there to cover it within the program. We just have to do a budget transfer. And then when you project next year, usually I project what this current year is, or depending on what program it is, I may have gone up a little bit depending on what their needs tend to be. So having given that disclaimer, I did put together a little PowerPoint presentation, which I guess I have to go up to the top. There we go. I think at the board meeting that Mr. Bass Knight said that there are 39 different programs in the operating budget. The operating budget is actually comprised of your state, local, and federal funding, and it's the biggest portion of the whole budget. So in your document, I can't help but mind you have your actual expenditures from last year. You have your budget for this current year. You have your actual, what you have spent through March 31st of this year. And then you have your proposed for next year, and then you should see a % increase or decrease in your detail, and hopefully there's an explanation of why things went up or went down. Technology kicks me. There are also some appendixes in the budget, the capital improvements plan, which goes to the county. I have not heard whether or not they have approved our requested funding for that. Capital outlay request, a little detail there for maintenance capital projects. There are 2 enterprise funds. Enterprise funds are self-sustaining funds. The revenues they receive are supposed to cover the expenses that they incur. So 2 of those, school nutrition and the after-school enrichment program. Proposed student fees, there has not been a change to what's proposed for next year. There may be one. I think we just need to study the numbers more closely to make sure that the 2 enterprise funds specifically are covering their cost. And we will get that done. It may bring something forward at a later date. And then a glossary. Glossary explains terms. Some things are probably left out of the glossary. There could be some things that came from 2018 or 2010 that are still old and probably need to be deleted. The budget process, what happens is in January we give each school a target budget, and that is comprised of money that they will be allocated for instructional supplies, for athletics, for music, for media, for office operations. And if they need anything above and beyond that target, They have the opportunity to request it. They get input from their staff, the school improvement team, and any other stakeholder that they may wish to include. Typically, what you see is they ask for capital outlay. They don't ask for additional instructional supplies. They may ask for some technology. And some schools ask for positions, and we address positions separately because in May or June, we're going to start looking at the people that are leaving and the people that need to be replaced. And do we replace 100%? Do we need to replace 100%? So that's a tedious process that'll be taking place in the next few months and over the summer. Once requests are received from the schools, they're farmed out to the directors, director of secondary instruction, elementary instruction, assistant superintendent, interim finance officer, and superintendent. I'll have a chance to review the request. The director of maintenance looks at the maintenance request and provides his input. Director of technology does the same thing. And as I mentioned earlier, the personnel staffing requests are going to be reviewed based on what enrollments are at the different schools and what the needs are. So we project revenues. We project expenditures. Personnel costs, we usually have some information from the state, and it fluctuates. Obviously, the General Assembly has not approved a budget yet, so we go with what DPI's best guess is at that time, which, thank you, Emily, for sharing that information. She was the one to receive it this year. We're looking at a 5% right now across the board increase for personnel. You will see health insurance costs have gone up, and you will also see the retirement rate actually is only going up, or projected to only go up a very small percentage from 24.5 to 24.62. Of course, I can remember back in 2006, that number was closer to 6%. So you can see how it has definitely increased over the years. So taking all those things in consideration, any new initiatives that the superintendent wants to implement, the budget requests that had been reviewed, and anything that's necessary, like utilities, you're going to have to cover those costs. You plug those numbers in, and then you hope that you can get to a balanced budget. And right now, we do have a proposed balanced budget. The revenue projections are based on projected enrollment, which DPI provides that number, 5,036 students, which actually was our they look at the first and second month enrollment, and that was the higher of the 2 months. They had actually projected that our enrollment may go down a little bit, but they always give grace, show grace, and give you the higher of the first 2 months. And I think you need to understand why we do a budget by program, because that's how DPI gives you your allotments. They give it by programs. Now, when you see the budget resolution, you're going to see it broken out in purpose codes, which are your 5,000 codes, which are instructional, 6,000 codes, which are instructional support, and then 7,000, 8,000. So it's you tie all this back in to the budget resolution once y'all approve a budget, but it just makes more sense in my head to present a budget by program allotments, since that is how DPI gives it. Federal funding is basically flat because we have no idea what the federal budget will be, since they don't approve a budget until September 30th, I think is when their fiscal year, I know that's when their fiscal year ends. The nice thing about federal funding, though, if we haven't spent it by June 30th this year, a lot of it rolls forward. School funding formula, this is a fun one because back in around 2014 maybe, we always went to the county asking for money. We always ended up not agreeing, and so I have to put my hat off, or tip my hat to Bobby Alton and Dave Clausen. We worked together to come up with a school funding formula, and the beautiful thing about the school funding formula is it covers those costs that the state automatically plugs into their budget. Section 1 gives you your salaries, and so we're projecting a 5% increase in salaries, so all of those locally paid positions will also receive that 5% increase covered by the county. Same thing with health insurance and the retirement rate, if those happen to go up. There's the second section is based on student enrollment as well as the consumer price index as it's reported in February. How much did it increase from February 22 to February 23, which was 6.4% this year. So you apply student enrollment numbers. It's a per student cost for instructional supplies, technology, postage, things like that. And then you also apply the 6.4% inflationary index. Section 3 is adjusted again for CPI and rate increases, if you know what a rate increase is coming down the pipe. And those are those fixed, they're not really fixed costs, but those costs that you're going to have every year, like utilities, insurance, transportation expenses, maintenance expenses. So really, if you were looking at this from a purpose code standpoint, Section 2 are your 5,000 level expenses. They're your instructional. Section 3 are those 6,000 supporting expenses. And the state will not pay for maintenance or utilities or athletics or activity buses. The list goes on. They don't cover all of our support staff. You can jump in and add. So we are very grateful to the county for the generous funding that they provide us. You adjust the county funding by two factors. One is they look at what percent of our total local budget is funded by county contribution as opposed to other revenues like fines and forfeitures or rental facilities. So the county funds approximately 93% of our local budget, and the other 7% comes from other sources. You also have to adjust. You look at what you actually spent. You budget at 100%. You hope you never spend 100%, but you just want to make sure you have enough to cover expenses. We came in last year at 93% of what was budgeted or proposed. So if you add those two numbers together, it actually comes to an 11.8% reduction in what the per pupil funding formula would have allowed. And you'll see that on this page.
Well, and just to add to that, like, that's a huge, I think a lot of the reason we have such a great relationship is that argument's, like, that's done. It's an agreed upon number that we can all move forward on. And so it's not hashing out the little micromanagement stuff that we're grateful that the county supports us on,
We
and
are.
trusts us with.
It is a wonderful way to.
I'm sure it makes your job much easier.
It does, it does. It takes a lot of the stress off because you know what it's going to be.
Right.
In fact, it's easier to project than what the state's going to give you because who knows what's going to happen during legislation. So when you apply the formula, you come up with $1 million more roughly for salaries and benefits. The supplies is a very tiny portion of our local budget because the bulk of that is funded by state money. So that was a $72,000 increase. And then utilities, really the CPI is what drove that up. So $438,000 more. You apply the factor of how much is funded by the county and what percentage of your budget did you use in the prior year. So you have to reduce it by that 11.8%. So you're taking 88.2% of what the increase is calculated to be, and the additional funding we will receive from the county is $1,353,987. So I have not verified that with Dave Clausen. He and I are going to have lunch together later this week. He has had the numbers to review for 6 weeks now, roughly. So I'm hoping he agrees with them. If not, it's not going to be a material adjustment, and it's not going to have a great impact on our bottom line, I wouldn't think. So if you look at projected revenue by source, total of our operating budget is $72 million. The state accounts for $38.4 million. Local appropriation is 26.9. Other local is 2.35 million, and then federal comes in at 4.9 million. Federal will decrease in the coming years because the COVID money, the ESSER money, is set to expire in September of 2024. having said that, we are aware of that, and we are taking that in consideration as we build our budget, as we built our budget this year, and as it will be built next year. I've already talked about projected expenditures and how we come up with that. And so if you look at your total budget for Dare County Schools, total proposed budget is right at $78 million. We are a business. I mean, it's a business. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of employees. It's a lot of numbers. It's a lot of things to get right. DPI lets us know if things aren't right. An example I'll give is a salary exception. Somebody comes in and you think they're a teacher with 5 years' experience. They turn their information into DPI, and DPI says, oh no, you can't pay them on 5 years. They only have 3 years. It can also work the opposite way. Oh no, they say they're 5, but we see 7 years here. So that's what Emily's been working on lately, is these salary exceptions that you get. So you can't mess up salaries because DPI is a watchdog over that, and the bulk of our salaries are teachers. You also have a couple of things that we work with when building with the budget. I talked about the program allotments, and you also have to look at the chart of accounts that DPI puts out, because there's certain things that you cannot pay out of certain programs. I'll pick on technology. The only thing that you can pay for our central office technology people that go out to the schools, the only program that you can pay is you can pay for the director out of central administration. The individuals, the only thing allowed is disadvantaged student funding, which is program 24, that you can pay a technology person out of. The reason we know that is because we had one retire this year, and when somebody retires, you want the state to pick up the annual leave payout for that individual. So we look at when people retire and say, how can we make sure this is a state paid position so we can get the most bang for our buck? Maybe I'm rambling a little bit.
Not at all.
Not at all.
It's a big puzzle. It's a fun puzzle. It's a fascinating puzzle, and but it's tedious, and you got to pay attention to all the moving parts. Emily texted me last night at after 7 o'clock because she's always working after 7 o'clock. And she says, just found out we have to move to EC teachers from state funded to locally funded because their licenses have not cleared. No problem. We expect things like that. We anticipate it. So we'll move those out of program 32, EC, which is the EC program, from state over to local. But trust me, there are enough local expenses in EC that we can move those over to state to pick up that money that we're having to cover the teachers with out of local. This is just a beautiful, constantly moving puzzle. And you gotta live it to love it, or something like that. So that's it as far as slides that I put together. We have the option of going through the booklet, or we don't need to, unless y'all want to, go through program by program, which I would suggest you not.
I did that last night.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, and you found my mistake. So I guess the floor is open to ask questions, and again, if we don't know the answers or if we've miscalculated something, it can be corrected. If you have any additions, subtractions, we can address those too. But there's very little flexibility in what we can do unless we go to the county and ask for a different, for a new incentive, a new program. An example I'll give is last year they awarded us an additional $250,000 to increase teacher supplements. So that has now been incorporated in our county funding. And that was, again, that was very generous of them. Something they did not have to do, but it was a request from us specifically, or I guess it was because I wasn't around this time last year. But they were extremely supportive of giving our teachers the pay that they deserve to the extent that we can.
And I have a question on the CTE,
Mhm.
page 15.
Mhm.
that the current budget had no money for equipment, and then we've spent 11, and we're asking for none for next year, so what's that discrepancy?
That would be an example of a budget transfer that I haven't done yet.
Okay.
And a lot of times it just comes with, when the purchase order is done, it might get coded to federal. And what we anticipate is if they're not going to be over budget, then we will do a budget transfer to cover that line item. The other thing that's tricky about CTE, and you may have noticed it if you looked at program 14, the amount decreased significantly. It will go back up next year because we have months in program 13, which are CTE months awarded to us by DPI, that aren't used. And once we know exactly what that number is, we will request a budget transfer from DPI from program 13 to program 14 to support the program. And that's the only thing you can transfer it to. You can't transfer it to central administration or non-instructional support. So, you know, honestly, I could have gone ahead and fluffed up that number if I wanted to, but I was trying to line it up with what the actual allotment was. Because who knows? Well, I won't say that. I was going to say we could expand the program, CTE program, and use, 20 more months of employment. I mean, that could happen, and it probably will down the road in the future. So anyhow, I hope that answers your
Yes,
question.
it does. I have another question also, and I'm sure you're expecting it.
Let me make one comment about what Anna was saying about CTE, because it's a prime example of the description she was giving on the budget. We get money from the state and federal government in bundles for specific programs. And it's not like, and I think the misconception sometimes is, the state gives you X amount of dollars and then you divide it up. That's not the way it works. You get specific bundles of money for specific program items, and some of those do not allow you to move them from one program to the other. So you may have, if you didn't do a very good job like you do, very good job, you may have a whole bunch of money over here that looks like, you've got a couple $1 million here, just move it over there. It's not possible. So just because you've got X amount of dollars in the total, you really have to go down to the program and break those programs out to account for what you need per program.
But you can move it around within that program.
Within that program,
Yeah.
yes.
So like where you.
Just
on
like
that
13 and
page
14.
You've got under the instructional supplies.
Mhm.
That's one that was like, wait a minute, hold on. So that's one where you might have moved stuff around to
Exactly.
make it all work.
Mhm.
And if we don't need it, we can, somewhere else, we can plug it in there.
Like 056 is strictly state, and 706 is strictly county for transportation. Okay.
Okay,
And we're on-
and then program 28.
Mhm.
How many is that on 28?
Staff development, yeah.
That percentage increase is pretty steep. Just wondering what that's all about.
It's about going back and providing staff with workshop needs. Try to provide them the support that they need. Program 28 used to be funded by the state, and if I remember correctly, it was probably close to 100,000, and then they took it away, 13, 14 years ago, and never replaced it. Well, you have needs to train staff, and I think that's a intrinsic motivator for employees. If you can send them up and they can get inspired by motivational workshops or a fantastic convocation, that's what this money will be used for. We're trying to bring it back. Now, some programs like EC or Academically Gifted, which is program 34, may have some workshop expense built in it already. But what we're trying to do,
So I was thinking, so like, that's what you said about like programs that the superintendent wants to change
Exactly.
focus on.
Yes.
This would be,
yes.
are there other programs that
Well,
you're?
and this was a very lengthy discussion that Ann and I had. If you look at the current, at $4,500, okay, we're still on 28, program 28.
19.
Okay, got it.
if you go back and look at the three areas that we wanted to emphasize that I did the presentation for you, and that's learning in the classroom, recruitment and retaining our teachers, and security. Well, what we've done is we've taken money that may be in each of those areas in the budget or covered under those areas, and we moved some of that money over to professional development, because the professional development we're going to be doing is going to be on student learning, retaining our teachers, and security. So we just specified that we're putting it in professional development, but we're still going to emphasize those three areas that I was telling you about. So we've really targeted it to go in those areas as opposed to having it in those budgets.
And also directors, both technology, elementary and secondary, they get requests all the time. I would love to send this staff member to such and such workshop. Do we have any money? So I hope out of this, we're going to be able to allocate a certain amount to each school so they have some discretion of who they want to send and how they want to use it. But I think the bulk of it is going to be more district-driven this first year. And we'll just build on that, build on our needs. But that's a good question.
We not only, we want to provide our staff with the training they need to be successful. And to do that, you've got to be specific, purposeful, targeted, specific. Here's what we need you to do, here's why we need you to do it, and here's how we're going to help you get there. That's where we're going from.
I knew you'd have an answer, I was just curious.
No, it's a good question. And this is a disclaimer, Program 28, I haven't checked it lately, but DPI may not let us use that PRC number for staff development. So when we actually have a real budget, that number could be 810, well, not 810, it could be something different. 1, 2, 3. Do we have a 1, 2, 3?
Good question, thank you.
That was
I
good.
appreciate you
Yeah.
letting me do that.
Ben?
Go ahead. I have others, but I have to find them first.
First off, I want to say, like, I know you tote them all the time too, but I just need to do a shout out for the commissioners too. I went through the budget and added up the positions that they fund. There's 150 positions that our county commissioners give us. That means 150 people out of jobs. That means teachers more stressed, and that's really, like,
It's huge.
and I've been when we've been at the NCSBA conference, and we've had people come up like, how does your county do this? We hear about your funding formula. How does that work? So it's really awesome that our county is one of the, thinking forward on that and realizing how important that relationship is. So just another shout out to the commissioners. On the fines and forfeitures, in my I think this is my seventh budget, this number has been as low as 18,000, and now it's up to 727. So how does that, how do you develop that? I mean, this is just, is that a communication with the state? With the county, you mean, and from the courthouse and all that?
It's usually historical, and what I did with this year's budget is I looked at what was budgeted this year, which was $750,000. I looked at what we had received to date, which is over $400,000 right now, and which months we still have to receive money for, which
Right.
is March, April, May, and June. And I said, well, I don't think we're gonna get 750 like we have projected for this current budget year.
Right.
So I'm gonna just reduce it a little bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have, somebody skip, bond, and you get a nice chunk. That
Right.
doesn't happen a lot. I can't imagine why it would ever be as low as 18,000.
Seems like it was really low one time. Don't you remember?
I mean, it could be, but, and, yeah, another thing is
I
that.
just remember one time it being super low, and it was like, what's going on? Is somebody getting in trouble?
I don't remember being that low with the highway.
Yeah, exactly.
With the highway patrol on 64. I don't believe it was, it
Yeah.
couldn't be too low.
We encourage people to speed.
Yeah, we could. Speed. Maybe we should promote that.
Is this
Yeah.
on?
But they also, our attorneys take care of that with.
Right.
So that's how it's getting reported to us,
Yeah.
to our attorneys.
Some of it,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
And miscellaneous, what is, maybe that's the one I'm thinking that's been lower.
Yeah.
I just remember one being really high, one, really off, and it was such a, toss-up as to what would cause that.
Miscellaneous, most of that goes into Fund 8, which is other local which you don't have to share right now with charter schools. Can I say this?
Yeah.
Yes, and we shouldn't have to share it with charter schools because that's specific to what Dare County Board of Education receives.
Right.
Based on things like laptop insurance fees, which is roughly $65,000 that the kids pay every year, students pay every year. Driver's ed fees, which is $65 when they enroll to take driver's ed, so that's projected to be about $30,000. You've got sales tax refund on when we pay invoices. There's the county portion of sales tax we can ask to be returned to us, and that's usually around $85,000.
Right.
You have your rental of facilities. We have, the property we own in Manio. We have Back Road House in Buxton. All of that is part of the miscellaneous. The big piece of it, another big piece, is Medicaid reimbursement, which Emily does a fantastic job getting that refund. It's projected to be $85,000, but she this year we had a nice return. Yes, I say it. And I say it well. And again, that goes into Fund 8 because that is our money that we don't share because it's based on what we have spent ourselves. And it has nothing to do with student enrollment at charter schools. DEF gives a contribution to help maintain, the maintenance department
Right.
helps with maintenance of Run Hill Ridge. Rental of facilities. So, if you want to know where the $320 came from, that was probably a plug to make the, on the end of that number to make it balance.
Because
But
like you said, it's a documented.
it is, yes, it's planning too.
This might be a question for you. So on the at-risk program,
Where are you?
69.
69. I get, so part, and I think this might be a little bit of redirection, but just to clarify, I'm a one that's gonna scream for the underdog, so, we're spending less on our at-risk, but, and I know these numbers are sometimes small, but
At-risk is, there are a couple programs that carry over at the state level. At-risk is one of them. So when you look at this current year's budget, it's because we had money carried forward from 21-22. So that budget actually is more than the original allotment for this year was.
okay.
And
That
the
makes
reason
sense.
you can carry forward 69 money is if you needed to fund summer school or a summer school program with it, they allow you to use it up until August 31st. I believe it's August 31st.
So the reason the current budget is so much higher than what we're proposing is because some of that's carried over from the year before. Okay, well, that makes sense.
And what we will do, what we're going to be doing these next couple months, and Emily is very excited, is we're going to be playing with this puzzle.
Are
So
you trying to
if
convince
there's,
her that she's?
we're going to be playing, well, playing's not good, what we're going to be working with the budget. So if there's anything we can move from 69 to another program, so we can carry that money forward into next year to give us a
Right.
little state cushion for at-risk kids, it would be there. Perfect example, EC. You have a child move in mid-year, they need a one-to-one TA with them. You don't have anything in program 32, the EC program, left over, so you can turn to at-risk. So it's
Kind of like a savings for account
It-
for situations like that.
exactly.
That makes sense. Page 30. Sorry.
We're going backwards.
I know. I wrote it all, I was, yeah. For the instructional supplies, and I know these numbers, I know when you're looking at a $78 million budget, some of this stuff is like, really, are you seriously gonna have a 20-minute conversation over $2,000? But, when we do instructional supplies and things, so I know there's been talk in the past about should we buy textbooks? Textbooks are becoming more obsolete, are we doing online stuff? So would this include stuff from online subscriptions and things like that, or is there other ways that we're able to pull into that? And I know there's other programs that maybe we can spend on that too. I guess my question on this is not so much the money that's allotted, obviously it's there, but I feel like sometimes spending money on actual textbooks, cause they change so much now. Like, are we getting the most bang for our buck?
I don't think I'm the one to answer that question.
Well,
Over the past few years, the state has moved away from funding textbook purchases. There used to be, you were given an allotment that you had X amount of dollars to purchase textbooks for this year, and each year would have its own adoption. So you do math this year, social studies next year, science the following year. So you didn't have to buy a whole bunch of books for redoing an entire curriculum
Right.
each year. The state has moved away from that because a lot fewer schools are purchasing textbooks these days because they become obsolete as soon as you buy them.
Right.
An online resource can be updated at any point during the year as opposed to purchasing a textbook, and now you have that book for 5 years. And so from a social studies teacher, basically no history takes place until you buy your next textbook because you can't study the last 5 years, they're not in the textbook.
right.
So there has been a move away from hard copy textbooks. Do we still have some hard copy textbooks? Yes. And we still provide those resources where students need them.
So are those, so that money, that 700, is that going towards like online subscriptions and things like that to different, you understand my question?
I do understand your question, and I would say, part of it can, yes, but I found the big mistake. The big mistake is there's a PRC 15, which is in the summary, but the actual sheet for PRC, which is technology,
Uh-huh.
got omitted out of the booklet, and it's not something I caught. But anyhow, there's 749,000 in that program,
Uh-huh.
which includes, telecommunications, school connectivity, as well as subscriptions, software subscriptions.
Uh-huh.
So you have two places you can take it from. You can take it from that program 15, which I'll get you a copy of that actual page, and I apologize for it not being in here. Or program 61, your instructional supplies, which also includes that textbook allocation. You can move money from textbook allocation to technology as well. Isn't that right? 131 versus 130, to purchase subscriptions as opposed to hard copy
That was
books.
Mr. Basnot's favorite summer job.
That
Huh?
was, that
Oh,
was my
yeah,
summer job.
textbooks.
That was my summer job. So the short answer is yes, but you can move some of the money over, and it is funding some of our technology.
And I have one last question,
Oh, you're good.
and then how much do we currently have in our fund balance?
We ended last school year, with, I think it was 954,000. The county suggests that we not increase it over $1 million, and in the past, anything that's over $1 million gets returned to the county. The example I'll give is in, the 2021 financial statement showed a 2.5 million overage over that magical million. So they reduced this current year's funding by 2.5 million. That's how we returned the 2.5 to them. So doing this year's budget, you work off the 21-22 financial statement,
Right.
which had the 954,000 in your unassigned fund balance. But that doesn't answer your question. What is our fund balance today? I can't tell you. I don't,
Well, I know that's another moving part.
it's a moving part. And our goal is at the end of the year to make sure it's somewhere right around $1 million.
Right.
Um,
Well, and I know there's some people like you think we should have, but if we needed something over that, we could still go to the county.
We could go to that,
It's not
and
like
the
if-
relationship,
Right, we have a strong enough relationship.
yes,
that that's not an
absolutely.
issue.
And
Well,
the-
I know how, and this is my 7th budget, how hard you work on this, so thank you very much. I know it's very tedious and it's a lot of moving parts
It's
to make it
fun.
all work.
She loves it.
In a sick sort of way.
You must, you have
In a
to.
six or a-
It's therapeutic almost. Almost.
Thank you for all your
Thank
work
you,
on this.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments by the board?
Good job.
Yeah.
Mr. Bassnight, anything?
Yes, sir. I think we're good. The board doesn't have any more questions.
We're-
Anna, once again, thank you. I know with everything going on your side of the table, it's been rough, but thank you so very much. And Emily, same thing, thank you.
It's my pleasure.
You guys being a little shorthanded. Thank you for all the hard work, appreciate it.
Finance department here, they do an amazing job, just give them a shout out.
Yay!
They work hard, they work long hours, and, they're very loyal. We appreciate it.
Any other thing, Anna?
The next step will be at the May board meeting to approve the proposed budget. What we will do in June is bring a budget resolution to you. Depending on where the state is with their budget, it may be an interim budget, which we have to have, which is sometimes, it's easier to work under an interim budget, which allows you to continue activities in July and August until the state approves the budget. You know, sometimes the state waits until November to approve their budget, which doesn't help us.
They actually said in our last finance director meeting that they are shooting to approve a budget by June 15th, actually.
Wow.
I'll believe it when I see
See,
it.
that's right, that's right.
Target, target, exactly.
4 years ago, we went 2 years without budget.
Yep, I remember that. That was awful.
So as soon as y'all approve the budget at your next meeting, we'll get that to the county, and make sure that they have a copy of your approved budget. And then we'll work forward until we have a county and a state budget.
Sounds good.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Appreciate y'all.
Emily, thank you. But there's no more questions, I'd like to request a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion?
Second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are now adjourned. Thank you all.